Your drape is the same left and right. On the top side, because when you overlap the right side's on top, the bow that sews to this side is 28 inches, the way that we draped it here for this length, okay? The piece that goes underneath, it's symmetric, there's no change, but this has to go through the side seam, around the back of the waist, and then tie to that first piece here, right? So that piece needs to be 50 inches. You don't see it here because it's on the inside, so thank you for doing a little hole there. So it comes out here, 50 inches long from this point, and it wraps around, and then when it comes around, it matches up with this one and ties, and that's what keeps the garment together. So it's very secure, and when you have the measurements that I'm given, it'll fit about a size 8. If you have a bigger size, the measurements are shorter, but that 28 inches doesn't really change because that bow is going to be that size regardless of the size. It's just the longer one changes. Okay, so that's how that works. I'll put these patterns back up when I'm done, but I'm going to show you in terms of before you take this off, you had your black tape or your design line for your collar. Make sure that line is there. You're probably going to want to put a notch to control how you sew your collar so you don't get too stretched out as you're sewing. So put a notch right here at the bust level, and always with any collar, always have a notch at the shoulder. So where you go from center back to the shoulder, you always need that notch. Also, you're going to need to have the under part of the collar seam allowance plus or stitching a line plus a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So this piece, once you have all those markings, this piece comes off and you will transfer your stitch line. Okay, and this is your shoulder line. This is your stitch line. And this is your center back here. And if it's a little awkward, maybe blend it a little nicer because that line's a little wonky right there, right? Make sure you have a 1/4 inch, and that's going to be your seam allowance. So I was a little short here on the muslin, but I don't want to jip myself on the paper pattern.
So 1/4 inch seam allowance.
1/4 inch seam allowance for collars. Okay. And so the pattern piece, you transfer it to paper just like you always do. And the pattern piece is going to be, you're going to cut 2 because you have a seam at center back. So you have left and right. And the pattern piece, oops, on this one, I have a little extra here because that pin was my seam allowance. So you could do a 1/4 or a 1/2 inch on center back, whichever you prefer. It doesn't have stress on it. Make sure you hit your notches. And your pattern piece looks like this. Okay? So if you're going to put fusing, just put fusing on the bottom part, so you're going to go halfway with fusing. If you're not going to use fusing because it's bias, and depending again on your fabric, you probably won't need it for this type of a collar. So, so cut 2 like this. Then on this piece, you have a choice of how you sew it. Again, make sure you have your shoulders indicated, your armhole. I didn't finish out the sleeve completely, but matching up with this armhole. When you get the blousiness of your sleeve, draw your line for that. Probably easier to do flat pattern than with this, but give yourself a few key points. And the seam allowance here is also a 1/4 inch because it's your neckline. Now you can make a facing piece. If you're going to do a facing, I would recommend going at about the princess line up here and tracing it, stay clear of your bust, and then tracing it down to about center front when you get about at this point. So you have a piece like this. That would be a higher quality, depending again on your fabric, if that was necessary. And then you could sandwich your collar and your sash in that facing piece. A less expensive version would be to sew it this way, where everything's hidden under the collar. You could overlock the edges and just do a small hem. So again, budget of the design is gonna determine how you sew it. Can you stop just for a minute? Because